Good afternoon, everyone. Olga Timanova is with you, and I greet you at Media Center Ukraine at Ukrinform. 127th day of full-scale invasion of Russian Federation, of Russian aggressor into our land, and we will speak about worsening of humanitarian situation in Ukraine related to the invasion, and about efforts that are conducted by humanitarian organizations to assist our people. And I would like to introduce our speaker, Osnat Lubrani, humanitarian coordinator of the UN in Ukraine. We greet you and thank you for joining us. Please.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to all of you following us here on TV or online for this opportunity to update you, to explain how we have been working to alleviate the suffering of millions of people in Ukraine over the past months. And I want to say that besides myself, I'm very pleased to be joined by representatives of WFP and UNHCR and OCHA, who will be supporting me in responding after my remarks on any questions that you may have. During the past 4 months, Ukraine has been the epicenter of the world's attention, and not for good reasons. Since the start of Russia's war on Ukraine, the lives of every single woman, man, and especially every child in this country has been torn apart. People's loved ones have been killed, injured, and traumatized, their families separated. Thousands of homes have been bombed. The level of human suffering cannot be explained with words, but the numbers give us some idea. Almost 16 million people in Ukraine today need humanitarian assistance, water, food, health services, a roof over their heads, protection. These are conservative numbers that the United Nations is in the process of revising now, together with all of our humanitarian partners. More than 6 million people are still internally displaced. Some 5 million have now managed to return, but many know that they might be forced to flee again. More than 5.3 million became refugees in other countries, a situation which I'm sure most of them have never imagined they would face. And what is even worse is how many lives have been taken since this war started. My colleague Matilda from the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission here in Ukraine can give you more details. But what we know is that the number we have of almost 5,000 civilians killed and more than 5,000 injured is just a fraction of the frightening reality. And I cannot speak of precise numbers of the hospitals that were damaged and the schools and the homes, but we know that it is in the thousands. We simply cannot yet verify the exact numbers. And this is probably what I'm saying is not new to the people of Ukraine who are hearing me today. It is not new for the mother of a 4-month-old baby that I met when supporting the evacuations from Mariupol and the Azovstal plant there, who told me how she survived for months without seeing the sunlight, how she struggled to feed herself, and how she and others had to survive without enough clean water to drink. This is not new for the people of Donetsk, who over the past month especially have seen day after day their city being bombarded, their schools and hospitals destroyed, and having to spend hours in hiding, in shelters. They know what it is to live without piped water, which they can only have a couple of hours per day, some 3 times per week. It is not new for the people of Kherson, mainly those who are desperate to leave the city, to find safety somewhere else, but have been repeatedly prevented from doing so. Many even lost lives while risking taking the journey towards the west of Ukraine. It is not new for the people in almost the entire Luhansk Oblast, not only Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, where we have seen the images of destruction caused by the clashes between the parties to this horrendous conflict. I've been traveling around Ukraine, and my heart breaks when I see this destruction and this suffering. When I was in Mariupol in May, I just couldn't believe what came in front of my eyes, because I remember what this city was like before. And I visited many times, and it was beautiful, and it was developing, and it's just horrendous to just recall these images that of total devastation right now. And I felt the same in Kharkiv, but also in areas close to Kiev, whether in Bucha or Irpin, but also not so far from here in Ivankiv. And I stress that I'm not from here. I have been here for 4 years, including the past 4 months. But I can just even start, I can't even start to imagine how painful it is for Ukrainians to see their houses and your cities destroyed. We are making every effort to support the people whose lives have been torn apart because of this war. But the Russian Federation, also the Ukrainian government, have to do more to protect the people of this country and to make our work possible. Since 24th of February, the UN and humanitarian partners have provided life-saving assistance to nearly 9 million people in every single region of Ukraine. Nearly 2 million have received cash assistance and are able to make their own choices to meet their basic needs. And my colleagues who are here with me can give you more details on the assistance provided through these cash programs. We are more than 300 organizations working in response here, and almost 200 of them are national, local, non-government organizations. And I want to say that our work is complementary to the incredible work that thousands and thousands of volunteers are doing in the country to support people. Ukrainians are the first responders, and they are truly supporting one another. And I also have to say thanks to the private sector and local organizations, public organizations that have both supported our work or directly provided assistance where was needed. But I wanted to highlight also what we have not been able to do because of insecurity, because of obstacles imposed of us that prevented the United Nations and the NGOs from doing more. We could not deliver relief items, relief supplies, or access, or be able to access Kherson. We could not deliver relief supplies or have access to Mariupol. We could not support any sort of assistance and have not even managed to have the parties to agree on safe passages to evacuate people from Severodonetsk so that they could move in the direction of their choice. Access to those areas that are no longer under government control is extremely difficult, if not to say impossible. We are witnessing blatant ignoring of the obligations of the parties under international humanitarian and human rights law. The parties bear the responsibility for every violation against civilians under the international humanitarian and human rights law. And I want to call on the parties to comply with their obligations, protect civilians that have already suffered immensely because of the war, to protect infrastructure that is vital for the people of this country, and decisively and urgently agree on safe and unimpeded access for humanitarians to all regions, cities, towns, villages where people need assistance or from where they want to live. And we are ready to do our part. Thank you.
Я дякую вам за вашу промову і за те, що
For a kind speech, thank you for feeling our pain. And I want to invite for a Q&A session our team. So I greet Esteban, Sacco, head of administration of UN on humanitarian issues in Ukraine. Please join us on the stage. Kate Newton, deputy coordinator on emergency situations, World Food Program. Well, now, head of humanitarian mission of the UN, and Pierre, head of FAO office in Ukraine. Dear colleagues, you can now ask questions, so please raise your hands and introduce yourself in the microphone. Please. Question to Ms. Lubrani. Do you track now catastrophic humanitarian situation in Mariupol? Because you were participating in the organization of evacuation some time ago. And also, what does UN do to improve the situation? And whom do you contact in Mariupol if you do on that matter?
I think I will ask my colleague Matilda, who has been following the situation in Mariupol very closely, I think on the current situation now. But let me say that we have been, and we will continue to try to bring humanitarian assistance. We know that there is a big problem with medicines, with vital humanitarian supplies to Mariupol. We are intend to continue to try to get access there, but so far our attempts through the notification system that asks all parties to allow us the safe access has not been granted, unfortunately, but we will keep trying.
We have been trying to follow the situation in Mariupol since the Russian Federation has taken full control of the area. Unfortunately, we don't have full access, and most of the monitoring that we have to do has been distance monitoring, as well as speaking to people who have left the city. Whilst I understand that those in charge have been bringing in some level of support for the local population, I understand it has not been sufficient. There are still a lot of needs in the city and a lot of concerns. There are also concerns around freedom of movement in the city, including the filtration processes that people have to go through if they want to leave or enter the city. Again, we don't have full information about those systems, but we do understand that if people do not fully pass that filtration process, they can then be detained and held, sometimes in areas in Donetsk. And we do fear for their safety. We have documented in the past that people held in detention places in the areas controlled by armed forces, Russian-affiliated armed forces in the east, have been subjected to torture and ill treatment, and we are very concerned that this may be continuing. And we very much call for access for the United Nations as well as other international impartial organizations to be able to visit such places of detention to help ensure that ill treatment and torture does not happen there.
Дякую. Ще питання.
І друге питання від
And the second question from Ukrinform to Ms. Matilda Bohner. Please tell us the indications that the monitoring mission was not allowed to the place of, in terms of prisoners of war, Ukrainian prisoners of war. Does the UN do anything to publicly pressure Russia to get the access?
You're right. We have had full access to places of internment of prisoners of war within government-controlled territory, and we have not had any access to prisoners of war who are interned outside of areas controlled by the government. We have been in discussion with the Russian-affiliated armed groups in the east, in Donetsk and Lugansk, regarding access. I spoke to them just 2 days ago. They said that they will consider it, but so far we have not had access. We also have not had access to Russian prisoners of war held in the Russian Federation. We have had difficulty in having a dialogue with the Russian Federation on this. We will continue to pursue it and try to get that access.
If I may, just to say that with respect to the humanitarian assistance, I mean, we have, prior to February 24th, we have always been providing humanitarian assistance on what was then the contact line on both sides. And we have always been operating on the basis of the humanitarian principles of humanity, impartiality, neutrality, and independence, and that has worked well. Regrettably, for now, it's become much more restricted, but we are continuing to pursue a possibility of bringing humanitarian assistance to every Ukrainian citizens wherever they might reside, including in the, of course, the occupied territories.
Ще питання, прошу.
More questions, please.
Victor Melnikov, Victor Melnikov, CGT in China. My question will be to the Kate Newton. Please elaborate on the general situation with foodstuffs and on the issue of transportation of grain from Ukraine to the other countries of the world. And what are the diplomatic ways for resolving this issue?
Thank you for asking that question. I think the attention of the world is very much on Ukraine at the moment in terms of grain supplies. So before the war, Ukraine was exporting up to 6 million metric tons of grain every month. And we know that since February, this has dropped to about 1 million. So that's a huge drop. And what we're doing now is everything we can to optimize every way possible to get grain out of the country for two reasons. One reason is so that Ukraine can continue to supply the world with its agricultural produce. We know that before the war, Ukraine was a supplier of grain to the world. It was not a country that was receiving food from other countries. And it's very important that we maximize Ukraine's ability to continue to feed the world. I think last year it was about 400 million people across the world benefited from Ukrainian produce. The other reason, of course, is that we need to try to empty the storage facilities across Ukraine. So we need to make sure that the wheat and the barley and the sunflowers and everything that we see growing across Ukraine can be harvested and has somewhere to go. So at the moment, we're working very hard with other stakeholders, other governments, to look at all options. Now, obviously, opening of the Black Sea ports is the most important avenue to get Ukraine back to where it needs to be. And without the Black Sea ports, we cannot get anywhere close to the kind of export levels that Ukraine urgently needs. However, we're doing everything we can, which means by road, by rail, and now by river, to try to get close to the maximum output. And at the moment, we think it's about 1 million metric tons a month, and maybe we can push up to 2 million, but we urgently need access to the Black Sea in Ukraine. Many thanks.
Let me just ask my colleague from FAO if there's anything on the food issue that you want to add.
Yeah, no, very quickly. No, thank you very much. I mean, I'm totally in agreement with my colleague Kate on the situation. You have to be prepared for a long-term issue. There will not be immediate solution for that. So what we're trying to do also is, as Kate was saying, you need to have large storage capacity in the country. The harvesting season already started in Odessa and it's going to go ahead. The main issue is going to be at the end of the year when the maize is going to be harvested. At the moment there is some capacity, but you know that you still have 21 million tons still on the storage, well, still to be exported. And we reach a plateau of export. Maybe we're going to increase by 2 million, it's all what we're trying to do, but it will never be reaching the 6 million tons. So at the moment, what we need is to have flexibility in logistical chain, in particular at the farmers level. So I was discussing with farmers and associations in Dnipro and with colleagues from, with farmers from Donetsk, and I think the solution is to try to work at every level. So large storage capacity, small storage capacity at the farm level in order to increase the capacity and try to find other solutions. There is a solution we're working on at the moment, and we will explain later. Thank you.
Дякую. Ще питання, друзі?
Thank you. More questions? I'll have a question to Ms. Osnat. We know that regretfully, many Ukrainians now, or many civilians are in captivity of aggressor country, the Russian Federation. Is there a potential in participation of releasing those captives, participation of humanitarian organization in helping that?
In terms of prisoners of war, and that is the ICRC is really at the front
Ми
of
кажемо
that.
про мирне населення.
Speaking about civilians, we're speaking about civilian captives.
As my colleague Matilda was mentioning, we are monitoring, we are seeking access, we are seeking more information, and we will be advocating for their release, and perhaps Matilda can give more information. Certainly this is an issue that is of great concern to the UN, and something that we will be continuing to follow and to advocate for. As Matilda was mentioning, we have an issue also of access, of being able to corroborate and to be in touch, but we are pursuing it, and primarily I think the Office of the Human Rights is in the lead on this. Do you want to?
Пані Матільдо.
I can add a little bit. We have documented over 270 cases of civilians having been arbitrarily detained and sometimes facing enforced disappearance by Russian forces. We have been advocating actively on those cases, and we certainly call on the Russian Federation to release any civilians that they are holding. However, we know that many of those people are still held. Some have been released. So we will keep working on that, calling on them for release, and asking the international community to certainly have a dialogue with the Russian Federation regarding the release of detainees. At the same time, we have seen within Ukraine a number of people have also been arbitrarily detained and enforced disappearances, and we also call on the authorities here to fully comply with the rule of law in regard to any conflict-related cases.
Ще питання?
More cases, more questions. Thank you for being here. I thank you for helping our people, in fighting for freedom and for democracy. I thank you. Please, friends, stay with us. Next briefing will happen at 1:30, so Ukraine will prevail.